Welcome, experts. This is Zaib, and with me, I have yet another episode and a very good discussion. I'm pretty sure. Sarosh, how's it going?
Hey, Salam Zaib, doing well. How about you?
Doing well as always, man. So what we are here gathered here to talk about is literally been something that I just shared with you. So
Yes,
you're still like marinating
also
fresh in your
thinking.
mind.
Yeah.
So, but it's a very interesting thing. That's not something that I'm pretty sure that you haven't ever thought about. It's
Mhm.
certainly not something that I don't spend thinking about. Like,
Mhm.
it's a very important thing that I wanted to exercise in terms of having a discussion. And we were planning to have another discussion.
And thank God we did it for the time being.
Hashtag
That one, yes,
Ali Bhai goes missing again. But
yes.
this
I,
gives us an opportunity for me to dive into some of the
exactly.
archive discussions that I've like मैं लिख देता हूँ ना जब आइडियाज मुझे होते हैं
Mhm.
दिमाग में जब मैं किसी चीज़
Yeah.
के बारे में सोच रहा होता हूँ ना तो मैं
Mhm.
उसको जाके अपने मोबाइल में ना नोट्स पे लिख देता हूँ कि यार
Yeah.
I want to explore this thought कि क्यों है
Exactly.
and usually it initiates from a feeling that I may have like
Mhm.
अगर मैं कोई if I feel strongly I try
Mhm.
and dissect किया why did I feel this way कि मुझे ये emotional
Mhm.
reaction क्यों what triggered this emotional reaction and then I think about कि अच्छा maybe there's a principle that I hold dear to and this particular thing is going against it and that's
Mhm.
where I feel like okay now I need to elaborate and articulate this so
Exactly.
we're talking about false equivalencies in general और
Yeah.
उसके around बहुत सारी चीज़ें आ जाती हैं neutrality आ जाती है but for someone who has no idea about this term, how would you describe this term? How would you describe what is a false equivalency term?
I think the term in itself defines itself really well. It's taking two concepts that really have nothing to do with each other and elevating them to as a balance, on a balancing scale, trying to say if A, then B, even if B has nothing to do with A. I
Correct.
guess, and I think a example is warranted, and I'll go with something light and easy, right?
Hmm.
Because obviously this is going to get further more as we. But
Complicated.
we're just talking about kaleji or liver, as either Bakri Eid or Eid al-Adha is tomorrow,
Right.
and especially in India and Pakistan, eating the liver of the animal is considered really, a delicacy. For instance, you like uh, liver.
Yes, I do.
I don't. Now, a false equivalency would be, oh, you like liver, that means you like to torture all animals. Like, doesn't really make sense because in reality, you were not involved in the sacrifice of that animal, most likely, unless you have a farm or you're a farmer or
Yeah.
you are at Hajj, even in Pakistan and India and elsewhere, wherever they are doing Qurbani, for instance.
Hmm.
It's, if I recall correctly, it's not the men of the house. You actually call a butcher to come and do that for you, if I recall correctly. So you're not involved in that, but it's an example of false equivalency, right? Or a better example would be, if and this is going to be a little extreme, but the example you used earlier. Okay, oh, just because I am neutral because the left is very extreme and they have violent people and very crazy crackpot ideas out there. At the same time, I am against all these fascists and these neo Nazis, where it's like, okay, well, on one hand, you have anti fascists or the Antifa
Hmm.
who are literally they're not coming after you, a non fascist, a quote unquote moderate, and trying to beat you
Hmm.
down, with tiki torches in front of your house and try to like burn a cross or something. Whereas on the neo Nazis and members of
They
the
don't create existential crisis, basically.
exactly, and so that is a better example of a false
Hmm.
equivalence.
And this is where I want to like. I think it's a great point you bring up. क्योंकि इसी के around discussion करनी है हमें
Mm-hmm.
कि in political spheres
Mm-hmm.
because there is and this is me trying to analyze this perhaps because there's so much divisiveness because there's so much polarization, not just in the
Mhm.
United States but everywhere.
The
आपकी
world,
अभी
it's
अभी यूके के अंदर क्या चल रहा है? You've seen that, right?
yeah. I
With
mean,
Boris Johnson and all of that
yeah.
stuff.
I mean, further than that, I don't know if you just heard the former prime minister of Japan got
Japan.
assassinated by
Yes,
Shinzo Abe.
absolutely.
Like that
Yeah.
is it's
They,
it's happening. It's
there's
extremist
so much.
violence.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much polarization in societies. So the most natural, I won't say natural क्योंकि natural से लोग meaning लेते हैं कि it means आपकी फितरत में ये है. I don't want
Mhm.
to justify this, but
Mhm.
lack of a better word, I'll use natural. But the natural reaction that laymen people or normal people who don't have time, I wouldn't say
Mhm.
capacity, but just I'm just give them like husn zan रखते हुए मैं बोलूँगा time
Mhm.
नहीं है सोचने का.
Yeah.
They gravitate towards neutrality by saying कि you know what, ये उधर भी शोर हो रहा है, इधर भी शोर हो रहा है, I'm just gonna stay here neutral और मुझे तंग ना करो. Like I don't want
Neutrality is complacency. They're
again
complacent, they're
or
happy, and they're content.
um I might be diving into again मुझे खुजली होती है लेकिन मैं क्या करूँ? I'm just
कोई बात
built
नहीं
this
करें
way.
बिस्मिल्लाह
But
चलो
there was a very interesting personality called uh, यार अब मुझे उसका नाम याद नहीं आ रहा. Who was the arbitrator between Muawiyah and Imam Ali after Safin?
it is the founder of the Ashari school's great grandfather Abu Musa al-Ashari.
Abu Musa al-Ashari. There you go. So
The Ashari,
I
by the way, the Ashari creed and the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah they're they come from this guy.
okay. So this guy.
No offense
Again,
to my Sunni brothers.
no offense there, but it's just a fact of history that this guy
Mhm.
was a neutral, quote unquote neutral, because if any one of you have seen the movie Shahid Kufa in English or
Mhm.
Urdu or on
Or if you just
Arabic or
read books of
read
history,
about him. Read books of history, so you will see that this person, in when there was this conflict between Imam Ali and
yeah,
Muawiyah,
Battle of
he said
Safin,
बैटल ऑफ सफीन ही सेड यू नो व्हाट उधर भी शोर हो रहा है और उधर भी वायलेंस है और उधर भी कुछ है मोर प्रॉब्लम है और इधर भी प्रॉब्लम है तो हम न्यूट्रल होंगे और हम इस चीज़ को एक एक तरीके से रिजॉल्व करेंगे इन दैट
and
पर्टिकुलर मैटर और अभी अब तो ये तो हम
and
लाइक लाइक
uh, I want to
हाँ
pause it
बोलो
right there, and I
हाँ
do
हाँ
want to bring up a very important point that within the Muslim school, be it Shi'i or Ahl Sunnah, the movement that came out of this, because idhar bhi shor ho raha hai, udhar bhi shor ho raha hai,
हाँ
have
इज
been
यस
universally condemned as being outside the fold of Islam, and they're called the Khawarijun.
खारिज एग्जैक्टली एग्जैक्टली वो तो बिल्कुल वो तो इसकी एक समझ लो कि इस चीज़ को प्रूव कर रहा है जो मैं बात कहना चाह रहा हूँ कि इस चीज़ को
Mhm.
सपोर्ट करिए चीज़
Mhm.
उससे बढ़ के in that instance, like if we pause history at that moment, and if
Mhm.
any of our listeners who's listening and watching, if I put myself there, were living in that time, and if I use the same principles that a lot of the human beings and people and so-called analysts are using these days, where they said, कि यार, there's so much noise over there and there's so much noise over here, वहाँ तो फिर भी आप थोड़ा सा लीवे दे सकते हो because there are two armies, literally two people with
Mhm.
arms fighting one another, so you can
Mhm.
easily for a layman to walk into that scenario you can easily see यार इधर भी जंग हो रही है इधर भी जंग जो लोग खड़े हुए हैं तो
Mhm.
you know what I'm just gonna walk away तो आपको तो फिर भी थोड़ा सा लीवे दे सकते हो उस सिनेरियो में जिस सिनेरियो की मैं बात कर रहा हूँ and you also touched upon the left and the right generally
Mhm.
not just in the United States in Pakistan and India for example as well
Especially India,
uh,
yeah,
especially
definitely.
India. तो जो left है, you can have many issues with the left. I have many issues with the left. I've documented them on my
Mhm.
podcast. We've discussed about them like very openly.
Mhm.
And you can have issues with the right, but there's no way that you can draw equivalency between these two polar opposites by suggesting just because of the fact that they are extreme to the center. Center के अगर वो इस साइड पर है तो वो लेफ्ट है इस साइड पे है तो राइट है तो इट मीन्स दोनों एक्सट्रीम्स हैं ठीक है टेक्निकली ऑन अगर मैं सिर्फ उसकी डिस्क्रिप्शन में बात करूँ येस देर एक्सट्रीम्स टू द सेंटर बट दे आर नॉट द सेम इसको
Mhm.
फॉल्स इक्विवेलेंसी कहते हैं जिसके ऊपर मैं बात करना चाह रहा था इज
Mhm.
सिमिलरली अबू मूसा अशरी वाज I would think exercising the same sort of logic that we're condemning almost here is
Mhm.
कि इधर भी एक्सट्रीमिस्टीज हैं इधर भी एक्सट्रीमिटीज हैं नो स्पेशली उस इंस्टेंस में तो जहाँ पर जब रसूलुल्लाह is endorsing someone
Mm-hmm.
prior to his death, and everyone in the under the sun knows about who that person is, तो उसमें तो फिर तो सवाल ही पैदा नहीं होता कि आप न्यूट्रल हो.
Mm-hmm.
um, at the same point, साइड पॉइंट मैं वो दे रहा हूँ, आई नो वेरी कंट्रोवर्शियल, लेकिन मैं साइड बार देके मैं आगे निकल जाऊंगा इस पे. I'm not going to spend too much time, but हज़रत ज़ुबैर की बात की जाती है, राइट, दैट ही लेफ्ट जमल, ही लेफ्ट जमल,
Yes.
राइट,
Yes.
एंड ही रिकग्नाइज कि नहीं यार, दिस इज
गलती हो
नॉट द
गई.
राइट थिंग टू डू, दिस इज नॉट द
Yeah.
राइट थिंग टू डू, ही लेफ्ट.
Yeah.
मैं, in my very humble opinion, I also suggest that that is not also the right thing to do, because when haq and when the right has come in front of you, for example, Rasulullah आपके सामने आ गया, Rasulullah ने आपके सामने पैगाम रख दिया, now you walking away, are you still going to go to Jannah after that? No, because you have been now given the message. Now it's
Mm-hmm.
upon you to either accept it or reject it. You walking away is, there's no such thing in neutrality when it comes to haq or batil, right?
Exactly.
इसी
Yes.
को बात कर रहे हैं.
Exactly.
So him walking away, sometimes people take that as a, देखो यार, at least he had some courage to recognize that he. No, I think if there's a एक और level बाकी था for him to really
Mm-hmm.
turn it around, like Hur did. Hur could have
Yeah.
walked away and said, you know what, Imam Hussain on one side, Yazid, I don't know, you know what, I'm just gonna refrain. No, he
So
said, you know
yeah.
what, I'm gonna fight from the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea here is that false equivalencies are such a menace, in my opinion, कि public discourse में इतना menace है, क्योंकि जब वो एक non starter बन जाता है ना, when I say कि यार आप for example, अच्छा तुम तो lefty हो, तुम तो ना, if you're supporting like free college, or if you're saying कि healthcare होनी
Healthcare and all that.
चाहिए,
Yeah.
तो आप तो एक biased agenda. What do you mean biased agenda?
So
It's
I
just
think
decency.
what I want to say, I think the issue here, the underlying issue, is in false equivalency. I think is a arsenal for these people, right?
Yeah.
Is the fact that they see being neutral as virtuous.
Hmm.
Neutrality is seen as a virtue. Why is it seen as a virtue? Let's get away from religion, because obviously you probably have listeners who are not Muslims who may be like, who are these,
Or don't
Zubhair
believe.
or Abu
Yeah, or
Ashraf,
don't.
we don't care about these people.
Yeah.
Abu and all these people. Let's talk about, you see a rape victim. Rape victim is screaming on top of her lungs or his lungs, right? And the rapist is also screaming and trying to shut them down. Are you going to say, "Oh, I'm going to be neutral and I'm not going to, listen to either side because they're being both being loud and extreme"? Or
Hmm.
are you going to look at that and say, "No, there is a victim of rape here who is screaming for justice, and then there is the oppressor, the rapist, who's also screaming, but to suppress the victim."
Yep.
And is you cannot have a neutrality there.
और इक्वलेंसी
Neutrality,
वैसे ऑन पेपर, और इक्वलेंसी ऑन पेपर तो बनती है if
exactly.
both
There's
sides are
no,
screaming,
they're not
but
equal. Exactly.
it's false equivalency is what the
It is
discussion
indeed,
is.
indeed.
कि
And
ऑन द पेपर सरफेस ऑफ इट आपको लगता है कि यार ऑरेंज भी राउंड है और एप्पल भी राउंड है, तो ये दोनों एक ही चीज होंगी. नो, इट्स लिटरली, पन इंटेंडेड, एप्पल्स एंड ऑरेंजेस.
it
ठीक
is
है.
indeed, indeed.
तो
But
तो हाँ, बोलो बोलो.
that's the thing, right? Like you, they're hiding behind false equivalency because they don't want to have these real conversations.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that is the question that needs to be asked. Like for instance, you mentioned, uh, for instance, in the U.S., right? Like education for all, free healthcare,
Medicare.
Medicare, Medi-Cal for all. No, let's just stick with those two, for instance, right? Student debt forgiveness, getting rid of, having
Mass
people.
incarceration और ये सब भी,
Yeah.
हाँ.
What I want to ask the people who are, being neutral, right? How is that a good thing? What you're saying? What's good in there? How is someone who is trying to better their life, right? Let's say you have a child who was born in Oakland or in Southern California, in Compton, right? Went
Or
through the
south
school.
side of Chicago.
Yeah, wherever, right? Yeah, Chicago, south side of Chicago, and they went, and they're trying to go to school. They're trying their best, but the best they can do is go to a state school, and they have to take massive on debts I'll tell you my own story. Okay, I from my undergraduate, I have about 40K in debt. I'll be honest, that keeps me up at night.
And for anyone who's asking, I'm playing the GoFundMe page right now for
Yeah,
our friend Sarosh here.
yeah.
Please, please,
And by the way,
please,
I
please
am,
donate generously.
and anybody looking to get pumps, I am a needy Sayed. I'll gladly take it. Joking, obviously, but no, but like,
But
I,
no, really.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna say no.
Okay.
Yeah, but all jokes aside, right? Like, I know people that are, they have to take compromising positions in life because of these jobs. I know people that want to go to school. They're
Right.
really passionate, and they would be really great at the school that they want to go to, and get an education and better themselves in life, but they can't. Why? Because there's a barrier to entry, which is the student debt and the
Right.
cost of education, the ever exponentially rising cost of education in the United States. Medical bills. I knew a gentleman who had his accounting degree and his MBA from University of California, LA in the 80s. This man had a heart attack. He had a young
Mhm.
son and a young wife, and this I know this is someone I know them from 2006 to 2009. I knew that 2010. I knew them, and they live up in Southern Cal in North Bay in Petaluma. And this man had to work at a gas station, working just above minimum wage. Why? Because if he continued his six-figure salary, he wouldn't have enough money. He wouldn't qualify to for the medical assistance that he needed. His medication, he couldn't afford his medication. He couldn't afford his doctor's bills.
Right.
So how is someone, a well-educated person who has to compromise like this? How can you say, oh, if you're asking for this, this is, you're an extremist? How is that extreme? And even if it is extreme, how are you, what is so noble about your neutral position of, oh yeah, we should have student debt and we should have um, all this other nonsense that they are always pushing, right? Like,
Right.
how are you, how is that person who's struggling with medical debt or student debt, how are they equivalent to someone who literally tried to overthrow the federal government on January 6th of 2021?
अच्छा, मैं तुम्हें एक वो बताता हूँ, एक और एग्जांपल इस चीज़ में
Mm,
दिया जाता
mm.
है. Are you hearing feedback? But I can hear myself for some reason.
I'm not.
Hello, hello.
Hello,
Okay,
hello.
I think much
Okay.
better. Okay. तो इसमें आर्ग्यूमेंट बताऊँ क्या होता है? When you
Mm-hmm.
say things like free college or Medicare for all, it's a very pathetic
Mm-hmm.
argument, but I'll
It
put it
is.
anyway.
Mm-hmm.
कि how are you going to pay for it? It's unrealistic. It's like uh, very idealistic position to be in, and hence they move away from it. तो उनके लिए फिर मेरा काउंटर आर्ग्यूमेंट ये होता है कि उसको छोड़ो कि ये पोजीशंस आइडियलिस्टिक हैं या गलत हैं या सही हैं. पहले आप मुझे बताओ कि डू यू बिलीव इन दीज प्रिंसिपल्स? नंबर वन, डू यू बिलीव दैट इट्स अ राइट फॉर एवरी ह्यूमन बीइंग टू हैव their health care
Their
covered
health,
by the state,
their
their
education, their
education,
a
exactly, their
dignified
basic
job, and
necessities, basic necessities, their survival kit to be covered by the state. Is that a necessity? You feel like human rights में ये चीज़ आती है नहीं? I think more of them, and this is me again, keeping a lot of husn zan, assuming that they'll say yes. तो प्रॉब्लम आती है, वो कहती है यार लेकिन ये रियलिस्टिक. तो फिर मेरा सवाल होता है कि ओके, then you come up with an idea that achieves the same thing.
well, I have an idea. Okay, military industrial complex, take money from there. Why?
ठीक है, नहीं मैं वही भी कह रहा हूँ ना कि आप सब कुछ कर
Yeah.
लो, लेकिन if you going to poke holes into these
The other
principles,
argument
then
that
come
I have
with an
seen,
answer.
the other argument that I've seen as well, I had to pay my debt for society. I had to go through all this, and I should. Why should I have to pay? I did it, so why shouldn't that person have to pay?
So you're happy that the airline industry got billions of dollars of relief at the start of the pandemic because of how they poorly placed themselves in the market, or 2008, where banks and these financial
Auto industry,
institutions,
yeah,
yeah, exactly, they were
they
they
are,
were
yeah.
bankrupting left, right, and center. You're okay paying for that then, because how was
Well,
them
I don't have control over that.
fucking hell? I mean, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. कि जब
that
जिस
because
इसका कोई
they
end नहीं है फिर.
there isn't, because the problem is you want to be neutral. So what we need to start with is
Yes.
neutrality is not a virtue. There is haq and there's batil.
Hmm.
There's the truth and there's falsehood. And again, I think this goes back to this whole concept of us being really comfortable with the lifestyle we're living, and
Yes.
we feel like, oh, immigrant debt, the immigrant tax or whatever bullshit they want to come up with, and like leave the country if you don't like it. I mean, no. The thing is, there's something that's inherently wrong and, excuse my French, fucked up with the
Yep.
system.
Yep. Yep.
And the fact that you are not personally detrimentally affected by it at this very moment, so you think we shouldn't do anything about it, shows that you as a human being are a very shitty human being.
Right.
And this is going out to my Muslim brothers and sisters, especially. What's the point of you praying to Allah? So, well, why are you even relying on Allah? Why are you're against handouts? Why are you going to Allah for a handout? Because a
Right.
lot of these people, they're over against handouts. So why do you go to Allah for a handout? Why do you pray? Because is your du'as and hajat, are they not a handout?
Then the concept of charity goes face first flat on
Yeah.
the floor, right?
Mhm.
And everyone apparently, चाहे वो lefty हो या righty हो, centrist हो, neutral हो या non-neutral हो, everyone believes in the concept of charity. So I think if anyone is against handouts, the first thing that they should do is abolish charity
Charity.
and
Yes.
criminalize it to an extent where say, no, how dare you hand out to this poor guy or kids in hospitals and whatever.
The problem
Don't
is
do it.
there are people that actually are on board with this. They're called libertarians.
Right, that's what I'm saying कि वो तो उससे benefit लेते हैं, वो तो tax credits लेते हैं इन चीज़ों करने का, तो they actually don't even believe in the principle of giving for just giving, right? क्योंकि
Mhm.
they want to take credits for it. That's why when people talk about the likes of Bill Gates and
Elon Musk, all these guys, yeah.
Musk, all these guys that they give so much in charity, I would be interested कि उसमें उनको tax credit कितना हो रहा
Oh
है.
yeah,
I
it's a
I
hundred
would be
percent right on.
I would salute them if they would say, okay, I'm gonna give this $1 billion in charity and burn the receipts.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
ओके, तो करो ना, अगर अगर आपको इतना ही, अगर आप philanthropy, अगेन लाइक इतना सच अ स्टूपिड एक वर्ड यहाँ पर लोग कहते हैं, इट्स अ philanthropist. What is a philanthropist? Philanthropist, it's like it's a good question, right? Okay, what is a philanthropist? If that
Someone
person,
with money who is basically fetishizing charities.
and if that person is doing charity or doing social work to gain tax benefits, is that still that person still a philanthropist?
Oh,
क्योंकि अगेन वो तो इतनी हर चीज़ को इतना मटेरियलिस्टिक हो चुकी है हर चीज़ कि हमने एक वो टैग्स लगा दिए कि दिस
in
गाइज अ फिलैंथ्रोपिस्ट
quoting
और ये दिस गाय.
my favorite philosopher, one of my favorite philosophers of contemporary times, Rene Guénon, who actually converted to Islam and was a follower of the Shadili Tariqah in Egypt. This is the Kali Yuga. This is, and the Kali Yuga is in the Hindu doctrine of or the I would rather say the Indic doctrine of the Vedantas. The Kali Yuga is the final Yuga, the materialistic age, or in the Greco-Roman sphere, it would be the Iron Age, right? The blatant material worship.
Yeah, ठीक है.
Remember? Mhm. Yeah.
So what I was thinking as well, okay, there is if you further dissect this behavior, there are certain
Mhm.
things that I try and understand as to like why people go. First of all, they create false equivalencies. False
Mhm.
equivalencies lead to them believing that there's noise at both the
Both ends of
sides of
the.
the both sides of the spectrum, and then
Mhm.
they convince themselves, okay, because there's noise on both sides, us staying neutral is the best outcome or is the best way for us to
Mhm.
attack this or approach this circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
If you further dissect that behavior, which is something that I love doing, like behavioral dissection, क्या ऐसा क्यों कर रहा है, तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि उसके पीछे भी, क्योंकि आई थिंक फितरतन inherently human beings are gravitated towards a position. ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि human beings like animals can just keep walking straight and no, they don't worry
Mm-hmm.
about anything happening. I
Mm-hmm.
think this is also an indication of that, because themselves convincing themselves of noise in both positions, they feel
Mm-hmm.
like both parties are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And them staying neutral is automatically the right option. You know what I mean? कि by
Mm-hmm.
process of elimination, कि अगर मैं wrong की तरफ नहीं जा रहा, तो मैं जिस तरफ जा रहा हूँ वो right ही होगा एटलीस्ट, wrong तो वो नहीं हो सकता.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? क्योंकि
Yeah.
अगर हमने ये establish कर लिया अपने दिमाग में कि
Mm-hmm.
दोनों चीज़ें नॉइज़ हैं और दोनों
Mm-hmm.
साइड्स में इश्यूज हैं, तो मैं
Mm-hmm.
जब अब जिस तरफ जा रहा हूँ तो वो राइट होगा. दैट्स आई थिंक in their head how they are uh,
Justifying
uh,
this.
justifying this, articulating it. और अगर आप
Mm-hmm.
उसमें डीप करो उसको, तो ज़्यादा यही निकलेगा पीछे से. What do you
Exactly.
have to say about that? क्योंकि a lot of the times it's that, and then also that is coupled with
Mm-hmm.
this lack of courage to pick a side. Why do you think that's the case? Why do you think like people gravitate towards neutrality? Because a, either they feel like both sides are wrong, or b, they just feel lazy and
I
scared
think
to
I,
pick a
I,
side.
I think that's it's more of that lazy and not lazy but scared because we are psychologically speaking, so biologically speaking, humans are social animals, right? We can agree on that.
Yes.
We like being liked, and we like other people to like us.
Yes.
We don't want to go with anything controversial because that means
Some
people
will
won't
hit
like
us.
us.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we don't want even like, and it's interesting. Like if you look at social media, right, online, बहुत बार हम देखते हैं कि like people are posting things, and then they'll take their post down when they see that there's backlash.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a great example of that is Bella Hadid.
What about the recent thing that you just saw with have you heard about the whole controversy surrounding what's his name, uh, the guy uh, who said that I will not यार मैं उसका नाम देख रहा हूँ, उसका अभी मेरे उसमें आ रहा था सर्च में. um, Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson.
Oh, what did he say now?
Oh, you've not been following
No,
अभी recently क्या हुआ? तो
no,
Jordan
no.
Peterson, Jordan Peterson recently called like put out a tweet
Mm-hmm.
uh, where for some reason he addressed Ellen Page. Remember this actress
Yeah,
who's
Elliot now, Elliot Page.
now Elliot Page.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he said that uh, I would die rather than taking my tweet down, because in a tweet in which he called Ellen Page, sorry, Elliot Page, Ellen Page. Uh, तो जो तुमने बात करी अभी कि people feel scared to be confronted, and that's why they take tweets down, because they don't want to be looked at as controversial. What do you say about this instance where one person wants to be referred to as Elliot, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have no association with the previous life that they supposedly
Mm-hmm.
had. Do you feel like in that instance that is the wrong usage of sticking to one's point or staying controversial? Because in by your definition, if he had taken his tweet down, then he's also in the same
Mm-hmm.
realm of like being neutral.
You know, and this is going to piss off a lot of people, especially those on the left. What I'm about to say. I respect Mr. Peterson. I disagree with him. He's wrong, in my opinion, for ever stating that. But having said that, at least I can say with Mr. Peterson, he has conviction and he's willing to. Is that really the hill that he wants to die on? I don't know. I personally wouldn't. First of all, I wouldn't
Right.
even comment on that. First of all, if we were talking about the actual tweet, it doesn't matter
And he
to.
was suspended on Twitter, by the way, following that.
Yeah. The thing with Mr. Peterson, I would say is first of all, it's none of your goddamn business, right?
Hmm.
she's or she or he, whatever they identify themselves as, are not your relative. Okay, their lifestyle or anybody's lifestyle
Yeah.
does not directly impact you, and if it does, that's when you need to take a stance. See, again, this is another false equivalency, right? Where
Right.
he's like, "Oh, I'm being a martyr for the cause." What cause? There was no cause.
There was no cause. Yeah.
This person did legally followed the thing. Now, if you nobody's saying that you need to become um, from Jordan Peterson to a Jordana Peterson.
Right.
Nobody said that,
Right.
right? And no one's forcing you to become, to accept her. Like you can have. Here's the thing. I think people falsely, and this is a false equivalency, where they equate refusing to express your opinions on everything to having a neutral stance on everything.
Or having an opinion on everything.
Mm-hmm.
कि कोई उसमें बैलेंस नहीं होगा या तो we'll not talk and not give
Mm-hmm.
our 2 cents, or
Mm-hmm.
we'll just talk about every Tom, Dick and Harry opinion कि अब हर
Exactly.
चीज़ में मुंह खोलना ज़रूरी है.
Exactly.
तो अगेन वो भी एक तरीके से एक एक्सट्रीम वर्जन ऑफ फॉल्स इक्विवेलेंसी है
It
कि या
is.
तो मैं
It
बोलूँगा
is exactly that. It's
कि या तो मैं
actually a
बोलूँगा या तो मैं
I
बिल्कुल नहीं
would say
बोलूँगा.
that's a text. I would say that's a textbook example of false equivalency.
एग्जैक्टली तो बड़ा ये इंटरेस्टिंग वो चीज़ है क्योंकि
Mm-hmm.
गोइंग बाय एक और इसमें एक वो चीज़ आ जाती है. I feel like human beings and analysts,
Mm-hmm.
and we know our favorite analyst.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to name our favorite analyst.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to. I can, but I won't out
Please
of your
do.
respect.
No, no, please do. Please do.
Faraz bhai.
Yeah. Oh, yes. He's
uh,
a great look. I
तो
think with Faraz Darwish, I
हाँ,
respect him. I have the utmost respect for him. I don't agree with
uh,
him 100% of the time, but again, he's an
लेकिन
analyst. Yeah.
मैं वो बता रहा हूँ ना कि
Mm-hmm.
he's an he's an analyst, but
Mm-hmm.
like all due respect, he's not like by profession an analyst.
Mm-hmm.
He's by profession someone else. So I
Mm-hmm.
also don't want to कि अब for example if Faraz bhai, not that he says, but for
Mm-hmm.
example Faraz bhai comes and says कि आप मुझे journalist बुलाओ, तो I'm not gonna like, come on, like you're
Mm-hmm.
not a journalist.
No.
With all due respect to him, like फिर तो मैं भी
Yeah.
journalist हूँ अगर मैं अभी बोल रहा हूँ
Mm-hmm.
कुछ तो. You're a person with an opinion, I just like me.
Mm-hmm.
तो what people like him
Mm-hmm.
sometimes take a plea off
Mm-hmm.
when they say neutrality, और एक फेटिसाइजेशन हो चुकी है हमारी सोसाइटी के अंदर, एनालिस्ट के अंदर स्पेसिफिकली, कि they like to take the unpopular side, the
Yeah. They like to
unpopular,
be devil's advocate.
or they like to be different. कि मसलन
Mm-hmm.
अगर if the tide is going one way, I'm gonna stay here and just ताकि लोगों को दिखा सकूं देखो मैं एक free thinker हूँ,
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm different. Because
Mm-hmm.
the opposite of free thinker is कि आप bandwagonist हो, कि आप
Mm-hmm.
बैंडवैगन पे चढ़ गए और आपको कोई
Mm-hmm.
थिंकिंग नहीं है, यू आर अ फॉलोअर एंड यू आर एन एंट कि बस पीछे पीछे
And
चलते जा रहे
for the record, we do want to clarify. We're just using Farazbai as an example. We're not
हो.
saying that he
एग्जाम्पल,
actually is doing that.
नो आई एम नॉट सेइंग दैट एग्जैक्टली, मैं बता रहा हूँ कि लोग दिमाग में सिर्फ उनका नाम ही आ गया,
Yeah.
लेकिन आई एम प्रीटी श्योर फराज भाई जो भी उनके व्यूज हैं ही हैज गुड
Mm-hmm.
रीजंस टू बिलीव देम.
Exactly.
आई होप बट
Inshallah. What's that?
host is son, exactly, that's what I'm saying कि, लेकिन most of people like or analysts, they
Mm-hmm.
like to take the unpopular or the neutral stance because they feel like if ये in matter of choosing a left and right they are like neutral, so it means कि हम automatically different, तो वो neutral लगने का जो different लगने का जो
Coolness factor.
fetish,
Yeah.
coolness factor, हाँ there you go,
Yeah.
तो coolness वाला factor होता है ना कि देखो I'm so cool कि मैं तो भाई पहले से ही बता रहा हूँ. I think that is also an issue क्योंकि psychological problem होता है कि people like to
Mm-hmm.
stay cool,
Mm-hmm.
even if the 99%, क्योंकि बहुत से लोग कहते हैं ना कि majority is not always right. I agree, majority is
Mm-hmm.
not always right,
Mm-hmm.
but there are instances where majority is right. For example, everyone
Mm-hmm.
thinks कि murder is wrong, तो I
Mm-hmm.
don't, मैं अब ये नहीं हूँ कि just because majorities have that opinion तो मैं automatically just because अब मुझे
Some
तड़ ही है.
people just have, and by the way, what it is actually a word for it. Contrarian.
Contrarian, there you go.
Some people love to play the role of a contrarian.
और इसमें भी अगेन वही है, इसमें भी
Mm-hmm.
इट्स अमेजिंग दैट वी chosen this discussion because हर चीज़ में
Mm-hmm.
false equivalence है. एक या तो आप
Mm-hmm.
कंट्रेनियन होंगे या
Mm-hmm.
कंफॉर्मिस्ट होंगे.
Yes.
तो अगेन वही होता है ना कि लोग दे वांट टू पिक साइड्स, दे वांट टू से अच्छा एक तरफ कन्फर्मिस्ट है, एक तरफ कंट्रेनियन है, तो अब मैं कुछ भी नहीं बनूंगा, या मैं कंट्रेनियन बन जाऊंगा या मैं कन्फर्मिस्ट बनूंगा, दोनों ही रॉन्ग है इन दैट
And
इंस्टेंस.
this actually reminds me of another, this actually adding to this point. I think the people have a good intention, right?
Yeah.
They want to be balanced, and being balanced is good. We should be balanced in our approach, but
What, how do you describe balance and neutrality? क्योंकि people blur the lines between the two.
that's a problem. It's unfortunately in modern English, balance and neutrality have become synonymous, but they're different.
Yes.
Just like I will put out there, equality and justice are not synonymous. Let's go
Yes.
with equality. We can use that, right? And I
Yeah.
think that can, like, balance to me is more like justice, and neutrality is more like equality. Neutrality means I am not going to pick a side. Balance, and remember, balance means you need to balance it out. You need to weigh both sides.
Contextualize it.
Yeah. And then that doesn't mean that you come out and say both are right. You pick a side, but you've taken a measured and balanced approach. Have looked you have looked at the facts, or if you haven't looked at the facts, what you do is you say, look, it's not that you're saying I don't pick a side. You're like, I don't have the information enough right now to make that informed decision. There's a difference between that and being neutral,
Right.
which
Exactly.
mm,
One thing is admitting um,
one's
you
own
know
shortcomings. And
shortcomings, and the other is कि knowingly picking no side, कि भाई नहीं
Mhm.
मुझे तो साइड पिक करनी नहीं, क्योंकि मेरी रोजी रोटी चल रही है, उसको चलने दो. अच्छा, उस पे क्या कहोगे? व्हाट डू यू से अबाउट पीपल, डू यू थिंक हैविंग पिकिंग अ साइड इज अ वेरी elitist standpoint?
No, I
Because
don't.
people suggest for example BLM, ठीक है ना? अब मैं जाऊँ निकलूँ BLM की प्रोटेस्ट में जाऊँ, हिस्सा लूँ, या फॉर एग्जांपल शिया सुन्नी फसादात हो रहे हैं पाकिस्तान, फॉर एग्जांपल, राइट? A
Mhm.
Sunni guy says कि I'm gonna go and stand up for the rights of Shias, या फॉर एग्जांपल कोई भी माइनॉरिटी है,
Mhm.
तो वो उसकी फैमिली या उसके आगे पीछे जो लोग कहेंगे यार व्हाई आर यू गेटिंग योरसेल्फ इनटू दिस डजंट कंसर्न यू. तो वो बोलता है कि यानी कि उस पे ये आर्गुमेंट ये पेश किया जाता है कि बिकॉज तुम्हारी डेली लाइफ में इसका कोई इम्पैक्ट ऐसा सच नहीं है, इन द सेंस कि ना तुम्हें ऑफिस जाना होता है, तुम्हारा अपना
Mhm.
बिजनेस है, तुम कारोबार चलाते हो,
Mhm.
तुम एक उस कंफर्ट पोजीशन में हो कि वेयर यू कैन पिक अ साइड. यू नो व्हाट आई मीन? फॉर
What
एग्जांपल
else?
यूनाइटेड
Mhm.
स्टेट्स और चाइना और रशिया कैन पिक अ साइड. पाकिस्तान, ईरान और नेपाल के नॉट, बिकॉज
Why not?
वो
Why can't they?
दैट्स व्हाट आई एम सेइंग. कुछ लोग ये समझते हैं कि हम लोग साइड इसलिए नहीं पिक क्योंकि हमारे पास वो लग्जरी नहीं है, तो हैंस टू से अगेन फॉल्स इक्विवेलेंसी, हैंस टू
Mhm.
से कि picking sides is the nature of someone who has the luxury. So it means you have to be in that luxury to pick a side. What do you say to that?
I would say the fact that, especially when you see an injustice happening in your community or your society, or you see America or Russia or China bullying other nations, and your refusal to stand up to them, that shows less. That speaks less about their elitism and more about your privilege. If I'm, for instance, as a model minority, educated heterosexual male living in Austin, Texas, if I can, choose not to speak about an injustice felt by someone of African American descent by the police, because reality, my next door neighbor down the street, actually not well across the street, is a cop. Good relationships with the guy, good guy. I know that I pay my bills. I don't do anything illegal, or I am not gonna ever get caught, driving a vehicle that's not mine and get arrested or whatever. Inshallah, that doesn't happen. Like, I'm not gonna really run into the law, and the law will 9 times out of 10 be on my side. But it's not my elitism or my privilege that I am, able to stand up. And even if I do have that privilege, that I should use that privilege, because obviously this person who's being persecuted does not have that privilege.
लेकिन मैं वही तो तुमसे कह रहा हूँ कि द थिंग इज कि यहाँ पर आके ये चीज़ थोड़ी सी confusing हो सकती है when people suggest
Mm-hmm.
that picking a side and being bullish of one side, for example, Iran. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
take Iran as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Iran has natural resources, oil है उनके
Mm-hmm.
पास अपना, they have things. So if you compare Iran with, let's say, Pakistan,
Mm-hmm.
who depends on a lot of imports and depends on the world community to
Mm-hmm.
function,
Mm-hmm.
so they can say, यार वो Iran के देखो यार, they're self-sustaining, so they have the luxury to pick up a fight against the United States and Israel. We don't have the luxury, so therefore we're not going to pick a side. So do you
So
feel
let me
like
ask
that's a
you.
legitimate argument?
No, that's not.
Why?
Because it's like this. I'll give you an example. 2019 May, December 2019, me and some friends of mine, we put together a presentation at a masjid in Houston where we talked about, and the title of it was Profits Over Profits. And her whole thing was we took the military industrial complex, right? Would you agree that as a Muslim or as a peace loving human being, should you be working for a company like Raytheon or Lockheed Martin or Boeing?
Not on if my morals or ethics have a say.
Okay, so that's what we chose. Now, there was a kid, he came up to me afterwards. He said, my parents, for instance, they work in the oil and gas industry, and he's a petroleum engineer by trade, and he's done that for 50 years. And he's or 45 years, he's close to retirement. What would you say to him?
Right.
Like, he has a family, he has a house, he has a, you know, he's putting me and my siblings through college, where, you know, all that. So, this is technically speaking, they're doing the same thing. And if they are to boycott the military industrial complex, we should be boycotting Wall Street and boycotting the oil and gas industry. My response to him was, is it hubbul dunya or hubbul nafs? Is it hubbul nafs or hubbullah? Do you love God or do you love yourself? So yeah, of course it's not easy. I mean, nobody said, like, I mean, Iran ki example de rahe hain. Iran for the last 40 years has been under sanctions. They didn't become self-reliant and self-sufficient because the dimag kharab tha. Okay, they did it because they had no other choice.
Yeah.
And the thing is, um, if you're seeing an injustice and you're worried about the consequences, then you have no conviction. You have no morality. You are, excuse my language, you are a prostitute because you're easily bought, and your salary is your selling point.
Hmm.
Your comfort is your selling price.
Yeah, I think it's a very important argument, and I think
And I know it's very really harsh,
no,
but
I agree, but that's the thing. कि, and this is a good place to wrap up the discussion as well. कि, uh, making ethical and moral decisions, nobody in any shape or form ever said that's going to be easy. ठीक है?
no. Mhm.
Because if it was easy, then everybody would be doing it. ठीक है? So that's
Mhm.
an argument in itself. So
Mhm.
people, when they come up with such like intricacies of like conundrums, कि यार अब क्या करें? अब I work in the insurance industry, and you're saying कि you know, insurance companies and these pharmaceutical companies profit off of our misfortunes, and they are unethical and blah blah blah. So should I now leave my job and start doing something else when this is the only thing I know? Yes, it's difficult. Conundrum तभी तो उसको conundrum कहते हैं. But the
Yeah.
question is to you. कोई रूल तो और बना नहीं रहा कि आपको ये करना चाहिए. But the question is towards yourself. What
Mhm.
are you? What is important to you? If unethical practices of whatever company you work for is not important to you, then by all means continue to, because तुम्हें अपनी कब्र में जवाब देना है, मुझे नहीं
Mhm.
देना उस पर जवाब. So if you're able to explain that to Allah, and Allah is able to
Everything you
accept your
know,
then and fine, that's fine, that's your prerogative. But
mhm.
nobody said that this is going to be a very rosy and easy
Yeah, nobody said
thing.
no.
Nobody said.
Exactly.
So
Mhm.
there are also like other intrinsic values that a human being also needs to attach to their decision. It's not about like immediate gratification at times.
Mhm.
कि अभी मैं ये decision ले लूँ तो मेरी जान बच जाएगी. हाँ, that's immediate gratification. But in the long run, will I be someone that I be proud of myself when I look at myself? No. If I'm working at a industrial military industrial complex, that's all I've learned to do.
Mhm.
If I stay there, I'm going to sustain myself. Great, but will I be able to look myself in the mirror long run? My children will be proud of me? No.
Indeed. And I want to add on to that. And in quoting Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, when he was asked about, the Battle of Siffin, I believe it was, that what should we do? When people asked him, should we fight? Should we stay? He said, in between truth and falsehood, there is no neutrality. You can be
Exactly.
balanced, but you can't be neutral.
Yeah.
And you have to pick a side. And when you're being neutral and you see an oppression happening, you see an injustice happening, guess what? Your neutrality is only on face value. In reality, you are on the side of the oppressor. You
Absolutely.
are.
Cannot agree with that anymore. I think
And quoting Adolf Hitler,
perfect way to wrap
yeah,
this up, I guess.
great way to wrap it up. Uh, it doesn't take evil men to do, and then just the world of the tyranny doesn't come because evil men goose step around and destroy the world. It's when the few good men stay in silence and do nothing.
Yep.
I, I,
100%. I think
I'm paraphrasing, and I probably butchered that quote, but so I think it is attributed to Adolf
if
Hitler.
if if anyone's a butcher in that scenario, it's Adolf Hitler. So I think you can take the pass there. But yeah, again, really appreciate it. I think this was a very very good discussion. I think we touched upon a lot of things that we want to talk about: neutrality, false equivalencies, this idea that you know ethical and moral values are
We're,
something that you subjectify and be basically quiet about some and loud about the others. But
we're not
yeah, I
living
think
we're not living in a Walt Whitman fantasy of transcendentalism where everybody's sitting around singing "Kumbaya." Okay,
yep,
we live in a real
exactly.
world. There are
There are
good.
difficult decisions to be made.
There are.
There's
There are.
no
Otherwise,
one
this
says
wouldn't
it's
be
going to be
life.
easy. Yeah, absolutely. There's no one said this is going to be easy. So when people come with hard conundrums, I say to them, admitting my own you know ignorance or uh, elitism, whatever you want to call it, admitting that, but I still say to them, no one said this is going to be easy.
Exactly. And what I would add to that is know your limits. Yeah, no, but not everybody is hur, right?
Yeah.
Because keep in mind, there were people who realized in Medina, but for whatever their circumstances, they couldn't join Imam Hussain.
Yeah.
But
That's another thing, वो फिर
real,
nuances हैं उसमें, हर चीज में हमको यहाँ पर एक
so
black and
for
white नहीं
instance, let's say
बैठे.
now I'm not saying today that if you're working for Lockheed Martin, you go quit your job today.
Right.
Or if you're working for the Wall Street, you go quit your job. No, you start exploring how do I get out of this, and how much can I handle? Like, look,
Or at the very least
the
admitting that this
yeah,
is a conundrum. क्योंकि बहुत से लोग
yes,
तो उसको conundrum भी ट्रीट नहीं करते, कहते हैं खैर है whatever, मैं तो अपना रोजी रोटी हक हलाल की कमा रहा हूँ ना.
and then you're sleeping, you're asleep, and
I'm
then
not saying कि, again like you said, not saying कि अभी revolutionary changes अभी से शुरू करो, but eventually pathway
and I'll
बनाओ
give
उसका कि यार मुझे इस direction पे जाना है, मुझे इस trip पे जाना है, तो I want to eventually get out of it first. But first you need to recognize there's a problem.
yeah, and I will leave you actually with a better quote from Shahid Ustad Sabta Jafar.
Oh, perfect.
अल अजल तो कहते हैं आ गए तो क्या होगा क्या हमारी तैयारी पेश हम करेंगे क्या
Absolutely.
so,
100%.
and
Yeah.
so Imam is coming. Are you going to be with him, or are you going to be one of those people who are going to be sitting around? Imam, you're an extremist. The Jal is an extremist, so I'm going to be neutral.
That's another thing. It's a very good thing because ये भी तो मसला होता है ना कि radical changes को हम लोग कभी भी सपोर्ट इसलिए नहीं करते क्योंकि बहुत radical लगते हैं बाय डेफिनेशन. एंड वी से यार ये बहुत ज्यादा हो रहा है यार, ये ऐसे नहीं हो
Let
सकता,
me ask
रेवोल्यूशन
you
थोड़ी आ
this.
सकती.
Let me ask you this. And when I ask you, I'm not asking you. I'm asking these people. You have a person who has a heart attack, and their heart just is like streamlined. Do you not take the defibrillator and you shock them?
Right.
That's radical.
Yeah. Or cut
Logical,
them, or
yeah,
cut the body
yeah.
into pieces.
That's
Yeah, to fix
actually
something.
a very traumatic surgery for the body.
Very traumatic.
When someone has cancer, what do? You chemo the shit out of them.
Yep.
You don't sit around and go, you know what? Why don't you make lifestyle changes? No, right? You are at that point where you need to, and radical, being radical and extreme isn't bad. It depends on on where you
Circumstances.
are. Exactly. If there's a young child, a young teenager, 18-year-old coming out, and they see that, if I go work, like if I go study petroleum engineering, or if I go study this, I'll join this. Then don't do that. Go study a field where you can earn a halal lawful earning.
And
It's easier to do
be
that.
okay with it as well. Like, be able to look yourself in the mirror.
Yeah, it's a lot easier for a 18-year-old or a 22-year-old fresh grad to change his career than someone who's 50 who's at a VP level or director level. I understand that, but
Yep.
the higher you are, the more it's like your heart, right? You might need a triple bypass. Diet and exercise isn't gonna cut it.
Yeah. Radical changes we'll have to do.
Yeah,
Um, Again, appreciate your time, man. I
no,
know this
pleasure.
was a kind of last minute discussion, but I think it was a very good discussion.
I, I, I,
We ended up
I
having.
agree. This was a great discussion and a much
Yeah,
needed discussion.
absolutely, and I really enjoyed it as always. And I look forward to welcome you back for another discussion down the line.
Inshallah.
And
Always
as
a pleasure.
always, you're always welcome. So
Right,
appreciate it,
thank
man.
you. Inshallah. For sure.
All right,
Okay.
thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.